My hands still had this morning's oil on them. Everyone else's suits cost more than my first bandsaw, and they gleamed under the chandeliers like wet river stones. 100 guests, black walnuts I had cut myself at 5 that morning, and my own father lifted his bright glass, smiled at the crowd, and called me a hobbyist. He thought that was the punchline. He had no idea who was going to walk into his boardroom the following week, or what she would put on the table. My name is Maya M. Evans. I am 28 and I work wood for a living. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and be sure to subscribe. It was Sunday, October 14th. The sun was shining brightly through the large custom glass windows of Chloe's new house in Cheyenne, Wyoming. The room was packed with people holding small crystal glasses of juice and laughing. I stood in the corner, near a tall indoor plant, trying to make myself look smaller. I wore a plain gray sweater. I had spent an hour scrubbing my hands with hard soap that morning, trying to get the dark wood stain out from under my fingernails. My knuckles were rough, and I had a fresh red scratch on my left thumb from a slip of my chisel 2 days ago. Across the room sat my younger sister Chloe. She looked glowing and perfect in a soft pink dress. Beside her stood our dad, Richard. He was wearing his usual weekend outfit, a pressed blue button-down shirt, and an expensive silver watch that caught the light when he moved his hands. He was a senior director at Oak Ridge Development Group, a huge real estate company. He knew how to own a room. He knew how to make people listen to him. "All right, everyone, let's open the gifts," Dad said loudly, clapping his hands together. His voice was warm and full of pride. The guests cheered and gathered around the large velvet sofa. I stayed in my corner. My heart started to beat a little faster. My gift was sitting in the middle of the room. It was impossible to miss. It wasn't wrapped in shiny paper or tied with a bow. It was a baby crib. But it wasn't just any crib. I had spent the last 4 months working on it in my freezing, dusty garage shop in Laramie. It was made of solid Wyoming black walnut. I didn't use a single metal nail. I used old traditional wood joints, sliding pieces of wood perfectly into each other. I spent hours rubbing it with natural linseed oil until the wood felt as smooth as glass. I wanted my future niece to sleep in something safe, something made with pure love. Chloe walked over to it. She touched the top rail with 2 fingers. "Oh wow," Chloe said, tilting her head. "It's very heavy looking. Did you make this, Maya?" "Yes," I said quietly, stepping forward just a little. "It's solid walnut. The joints are hand-cut so it will never squeak when the baby moves. And the finish is completely natural, no chemicals." "How sweet," Chloe smiled, but her eyes quickly looked away from me and towards her husband Mark. "Mark, maybe we can put it in the guest room, or the basement play area. I already ordered that white metal one from France for the main nursery. It matches the curtains better." A heavy lump formed in my throat. 400 hours of my life. 400 hours of breathing sawdust and working until my back ached, just to be told it would go in the basement. I swallowed hard and forced a small smile. "Sure, wherever you want it, Chloe." Dad walked over and stood next to the crib. He patted the dark wood with his flat hand, making a loud smacking sound. "Well, it's definitely solid," Dad chuckled. He looked at his friends, the other rich businessmen and their wives. He gave them that bright, charming smile he used in boardrooms. "I keep telling her she needs to put this energy into a real job." The room went a little quiet. Dad let out a deep laugh and shook his head, pointing his glass at me. "I mean, look at her. At my sister's baby shower they call her a glorified woodworker. I tell her every week, building cabinets is a hobby, not a career for grown men, let alone a young woman." A few of his friends chuckled with him. Chloe let out a soft giggle and covered her mouth. "Dad, come on," Chloe said, though she was still smiling. "She tries her best." I know, Dad said, taking a sip of his drink. He looked right at me. His eyes were not warm, they were sharp and cold. "But it's time to grow up, Maya. You're 28. Playing with hammers and saws in a dusty garage isn't going to pay a mortgage. You should ask Mark for a job at his office. They need someone to answer phones." I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. My face felt hot. My hands turned into fists inside the pockets of my sweater. "Tell him," a voice screamed inside my head. "Tell him it's not a hobby. Tell him about the custom dining tables you sold last month." But I didn't. I looked down at my worn-out brown boots. There was a very real, very painful reason I kept my mouth shut. 2 months ago I found a perfect commercial warehouse in Laramie. It was big enough to finally start my own real fabrication firm. But the bank needed a guarantor, someone with a high income to co-sign the lease, because my business was too new. Dad had promised to sign it. He promised me he would do it next week, but he kept pushing it back. He kept dangling that signature over my head like a carrot. If I talked back right now, if I ruined his perfect image in front of his rich friends, he would never sign that paper. He would let me lose the warehouse just to teach me a lesson about respect. So, I took a deep breath. I relaxed my hands inside my pockets. "You're right, Dad," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll think about it." Dad smiled. It was the smile of a man who had won. He reached out and patted my shoulder, 2 heavy, hard taps that felt more like a warning than a hug. "Good girl," he said. "Now who wants cake? Chloe, show everyone the diamond necklace Mark bought you." The crowd instantly forgot about me and the crib. They moved toward the kitchen, leaving me alone in the center of the room. I stood next to the walnut crib. I ran my rough, scarred fingers over the smooth wood. I felt a single tear burn the edge of my eye, but I blinked it away quickly. I couldn't fight him today. I didn't have the money or the power. In this family, if you didn't have money, your voice didn't matter. I was just the quiet, messy daughter who made things out of dirt and trees, and he was the king. But as I stood there listening to their fake laughter echo through the house, I made a silent promise to myself. I wasn't going to ask for his signature anymore. I was going to find another way, even if it meant tearing myself away from them completely. It was Tuesday, November 18th, a little over a month after the baby shower. The Wyoming winter had arrived early, dropping the temperature in Laramie to a freezing 12 degrees. My garage shop had no central heating, just a small, rattling electric space heater that barely kept my fingers from going numb. I was sanding the edges of a massive oak dining table. A client from Jackson Hole was paying me $2,400 for it. It was real money, hard-earned money. I turned off the sander and pulled off my dust mask. My breath made white clouds in the cold air. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Available balance, $14,250 and cents. I stared at the numbers. It had taken me 3 years of saving every single penny to reach that amount. 3 years of eating cheap canned soup and wearing the same old winter coat. That money was exactly enough for the first and last month's rent, plus the security deposit, for a commercial warehouse at 402 Elm Street. I already owned all my heavy machinery outright, so my only real overhead was the space. It was an old brick building with huge windows and thick concrete floors. The perfect place to finally register my business properly, hire a helper, and take on bigger commercial contracts. The owner of the building liked me, but the rule was strict. Because my business was not registered as an LLC yet, I needed a guarantor, someone to co-sign. Dad had promised to sign it today. We had agreed to meet at his office at 2 p.m. I quickly washed my face with freezing water from the garden hose, changed into a clean black sweater, and grabbed the yellow folder holding the lease papers. I drove my old rusty Ford truck 45 miles on I-80 toward Cheyenne. The roads were slick with black ice, but I didn't care. My heart was beating with a warm, nervous hope. Today was the day my life would change. Today Dad would finally see me as a professional. When I walked into the lobby of Oak Ridge Development Group, the warm air smelled like expensive coffee and leather. The receptionist, Sarah, gave me a polite, tight-lipped smile. "Go right in, Maya. Your father is in his office," she said. I held the yellow folder tightly against my chest. I walked down the long glass hallway and knocked twice on his heavy mahogany door before pushing it open. Dad was sitting behind his massive desk. He wasn't alone. Chloe was sitting in one of the leather visitor chairs, holding a cup of hot tea. Between them, spread out on the polished wood desk, were thick stacks of paper. "Maya, you're here," Dad said. He didn't look up from the paper he was signing. He just clicked his expensive silver pen. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Chloe," I said, stepping inside. The room felt suddenly too small. "I brought the lease for the Elm Street warehouse. The landlord gave me the final copy for you to sign." I stepped forward and put my yellow folder on the edge of his desk. Dad finally stopped writing. He put his pen down slowly. He looked at Chloe, then looked at me. He let out a long, heavy sigh, the kind of sigh a parent gives a child who just spilled milk on the carpet. "Maya, take a seat," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. "I don't need to sit, Dad. It's just 2 signatures, on page 4 and page 7. Chloe looked down at her tea. She wouldn't look at my face. Dad folded his hands together. "Maya, I didn't sign your lease, and I'm not going to." The room went completely silent. Outside the thick glass window a truck drove by, but I couldn't hear it. The only sound was the blood rushing in my ears. "What?" My voice broke. "But, you promised." "Dad, I paid the background check fee. I told the landlord you were coming today. I have the $14,000 for the deposit ready right now. I know, Dad said smoothly. He leaned back in his chair. And I'm saving you from making a massive mistake. You don't know how commercial real estate works, Maya. You brought the landlord a risky 1-year lease from a girl with no business history. I stepped in and offered a 5-year commercial lease backed by an Oak Ridge corporate guarantor. The landlord chose guaranteed money over a hobbyist. You'd be bankrupt by February. I am protecting you. It's not a hobby. I stepped closer, my voice shaking. I just sold an oak table for $2,000. I have 3 more orders lined up. If I get that space, I can build an actual firm. I can… Maya, stop, Dad interrupted. His voice became sharp and hard. You are not a business owner. You are playing in the dirt. It's cute, but it's not a career. Now, if you look right here, he tapped the thick stack of papers sitting between him and Chloe. I just signed the lease for 402 Elm Street. I stopped breathing. The air in my lungs turned to ice. I looked at the papers on his desk. At the very top, printed in bold black ink, were the words, Commercial Lease Agreement, -402 Elm Street. Underneath it, the tenant name was filled out, Chloe Evans, High-End Nursery and Interior Decor. I stared at the paper. Then I looked at Chloe. She finally looked up at me, offering a weak, sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. Maya, Mark and I are starting an imported baby furniture boutique, Chloe said softly, as if she was talking to a frightened animal. Dad showed me the building you found. It has those beautiful big windows. It's perfect for a showroom. You understand, right? It's a real business plan. We have investors. I looked back at Dad. He was watching me with a totally straight face. He didn't look guilty. He looked proud. He had taken the building I found, the dream I had worked 3 years for, and handed it to Chloe on a silver platter just because she asked. You used me, I whispered. My throat burned. You told me to find the perfect building. You asked for the landlord's contact info last week so you could review the contract. But you were just checking it for her. I secured a prime real estate location for the family. Dad corrected me, his tone cold and logical. Chloe has a degree. Mark has capital. They will actually make money in that building. I am not going to put my name on a legal document so you can fill a commercial property with sawdust and tree bark. You should be happy for your sister. I stood there for a long moment. I felt like someone had hit me in the stomach with a hammer. For 28 years I thought if I just worked harder, if I just built better things, if I just saved enough money, he would finally respect me. I thought the problem was me. But looking at his calm face, and Chloe's expensive teacup, the truth hit me so hard it made me dizzy. He didn't want me to succeed. He needed me to be the failure of the family, so Chloe could look even brighter. If I became a successful business owner, his perfect little story about the messy daughter would be ruined. This wasn't about protecting me from bankruptcy. This was about keeping me on the ground. I slowly reached out and picked up my yellow folder. My rough, scarred hands were shaking, but I held it tight. Okay, I said. My voice was completely flat. No tears, no screaming. The hope I had carried inside me for years was just gone, dead. Okay? Good, Dad said, smiling again. I'm glad you're being mature about this. We're having dinner at Mark's house on Sunday. You should come. Chloe needs someone to help build some of the display shelves for her new shop. I'll even pay you for your time. I looked at him. I really looked at him, seeing the man behind the expensive suit and the silver watch. I didn't say a single word. I turned around, opened the heavy mahogany door, and walked out. I walked past the receptionist. I walked out of the glass building and into the freezing Wyoming wind. I got into my rusty truck, put the key in the ignition, and sat in the quiet cold. I wasn't going to cry. I was done crying over them. They took my building, but they didn't know how to build a single thing with their own 2 hands, and I was going to make them regret it. Thursday, November 27th. Thanksgiving Day. I didn't want to go to Aunt Clara's house in Cheyenne, but I did. Clara was my dad's older sister. For years I thought she was the only person in the family who actually cared about me. When Dad used to yell at me for getting dirt on the carpet, Clara would sneak me cookies. I drove to her house hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone in this family would say what Dad did to me was wrong. The house smelled like roasted turkey, melted butter, and cinnamon. Downstairs in the living room, Dad, Chloe, Mark, and a few cousins were watching a football game. Their laughter echoed through the large house. I stayed in the kitchen with Aunt Clara. I was quietly peeling potatoes at the marble kitchen island. Clara was stirring a pot of gravy. I heard about the warehouse on Elm Street, Clara said softly, not looking up from her pot. Chloe is so excited about her baby boutique. She showed me the paint colors. I stopped peeling. The potato peeler dug deeply into my thumb, but I didn't care. I looked at my aunt's face. Did Dad tell you that I found that building? I asked. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. Did he tell you I saved $14,000 for it, and he refused to sign my lease so he could give it to Chloe? Clara finally looked up. She wiped her hands on her expensive linen apron. She gave me a look filled with pity. Not anger at my dad. Pity for me. Maya, you have to understand, Clara said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Your father knows real estate. Chloe has real investors and Mark's backing. Your father was just saving you from a terrible financial mistake. You don't know how to run a commercial business. You just play with wood. I stared at her. My chest felt incredibly tight. She knew. She knew exactly what he did, and she was defending him. She was using the exact same words he used. In that moment, the warm, cinnamon-smelling kitchen felt completely suffocating. My family wasn't just my dad. It was a whole system, and they all agreed on my place in it. At the bottom. I need to get my phone from my coat, I said quietly. I put the peeler down. I didn't wait for her to answer. I walked out of the kitchen and headed up the carpeted stairs to the guest bedroom, where everyone had piled their coats. As I walked down the quiet upstairs hallway, I passed Dad's old study. The heavy oak door was open just an inch. A sliver of yellow light spilled onto the carpet. I heard Dad's voice inside. He was on a phone call. His tone wasn't his usual loud, laughing voice. It was his serious, polite business voice. Yes, Mr. Vance, Dad was saying. I guarantee you Oak Ridge Development can handle the entire lobby of the Aspen Ridge Resort. It will be the centerpiece of the whole hotel. I stopped walking. Mr. Vance was Marcus Vance, the CEO of Oak Ridge Development Group. He was a billionaire who built luxury resorts all over the country. The custom woodwork you liked, Dad continued. The solid Wyoming black walnut pieces. Yes, the craftsmanship is completely exclusive to us. I control the fabricator entirely. Nobody else can build that design. If you give Oak Ridge the Aspen Ridge contract, we will deliver that exact level of hyper-realistic natural woodwork for the resort. I froze. My breathing stopped. Solid Wyoming black walnut. 3 weeks ago, Dad had suddenly called me. He had acted unusually nice. He asked me to email him high-resolution photos of my best work, including the Jackson Hole dining table and the baby crib. He told me he just wanted to support my portfolio and show a friend. I had sent him 20 pictures. I sent him close-ups of the hand-cut wood joints. I sent him details of the natural linseed oil finish. Dad wasn't showing a friend. He was showing Marcus Vance. Dad was passing off my hard work, my sweat, and my bleeding hands as Oak Ridge's property to win a multi-million-dollar commercial contract. Suddenly, everything made sense. A cold, sharp realization hit my brain. Dad didn't deny my warehouse lease just to give it to Chloe. He denied it to keep me trapped. If I signed that commercial lease, I would have registered a legal LLC. I would have a paper trail. I would be a real legally protected business. By keeping me in a freezing garage without a business license, I was legally just a hobbyist. It meant he could steal my designs, claim them as Oak Ridge prototypes, and I wouldn't have the money or the legal power to stop him. He didn't hate my work. He knew exactly how valuable it was. He was just stealing it. Maya. A hand grabbed my arm tightly. I jumped. Aunt Clara was standing right behind me in the dark hallway. Her eyes were wide, and her fingers dug painfully into my sweater. She pulled me away from the door and down the hall, pushing me into the guest bedroom and closing the door behind us. Were you listening? Clara hissed. The sweet aunt from the kitchen was gone. Her face was pale and angry. He's stealing my designs, I said. My voice wasn't shaking anymore. It was dead calm. He showed Mr. Vance my walnut table to get the Aspen Ridge contract. Keep your voice down, Clara snapped, looking at the door. Your father needs this VP promotion, Maya. The company is doing massive layoffs next month. If he wins the Aspen Ridge project, his job is safe. He's just using your pictures to get his foot in the door. He's going to hire a cheap factory in China to copy the design later. It doesn't hurt you. It doesn't hurt me? I asked, staring at her. He stole my work. He lied to a billionaire, and he made sure I stayed homeless so I couldn't fight back. He put a roof over your head for 18 years. Clara pointed a finger at my chest. He paid for your food. You owe him this. Don't you dare be selfish and ruin this family's future over some pieces of wood. You will stay quiet. Do you understand me? I looked at Clara's angry face. I looked at the pile of expensive coats on the bed. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like crying. The heavy, painful weight of wanting my family to love me completely vanished. It evaporated. I felt light. I felt dangerous. They thought I was just a dumb girl with a hammer. They thought because I didn't wear a suit, I didn't know how the real world worked. But when you build things from scratch, you understand structure. You understand how to find the weak point in a piece of wood and split it wide open. My dad's entire career, his promotion, and his survival at Oak Ridge now depended on a lie. He promised his boss a fabricator he didn't actually control. "Okay, Clara," I said softly. "I won't say a word." I picked up my old coat from the bed. I walked past her, went down the stairs, and walked right out the front door into the freezing Wyoming snow. I didn't say goodbye. I got into my truck. I turned on the engine. I had a lot of work to do, and I needed to find a lawyer. It was Tuesday, December 2nd, 5 days after I walked out of Aunt Clara's house. I sat in my rusty Ford truck outside a small, old brick building in downtown Laramie. The heater in my truck was broken, so I could see my own breath in the cold morning air. I looked at the glass door of the building. The painted letters on the glass said, "Ben Carter, small business attorney." I didn't go to a big, shiny law firm in Cheyenne. Big firms were friends with Oak Ridge Development. I needed someone who worked with normal people, mechanics, plumbers, and carpenters. I took a deep breath, grabbed my yellow folder, and pushed the glass door open. The office smelled like old paper, black coffee, and pine floor cleaner. Ben Carter was sitting behind a messy wooden desk. He was in his late 50s, with gray hair and a thick wool sweater. He looked like a tired man who had seen a lot of hard days. "Can I help you?" Ben asked, looking up from his computer screen. "My name is Maya Evans," I said. I walked over and put my yellow folder on his desk. "I build custom solid wood furniture. I need to register my business as an LLC today, and I need to know how to legally prove that a giant corporate company stole my designs." Ben stopped typing. He took off his glasses and looked at me. "Sit down." For the next hour I told him everything. I didn't cry. I didn't use angry words. I just gave him the facts. I told him about the Elm Street warehouse, my dad's position at Oak Ridge Development, and the phone call I heard on Thanksgiving. I took out my phone and showed him the 20 high-resolution pictures of the black walnut crib and the oak dining table. Ben looked at the pictures closely. He zoomed in on the corners of the wood. "These are hand-cut dovetail joints," Ben said, his voice sounding a little surprised. "And blind mortise and tenons. You don't use metal screws?" "No," I said. "Screws get loose over time. Wood moves with the weather. My joints move with the wood. It takes 5 times longer to build, but it lasts 100 years. That's why my dad used my pictures to pitch the Aspen Ridge Resort project. He told the billionaire CEO, Marcus Vance, that Oak Ridge controls my work." Ben leaned back in his chair and rubbed his chin. "Oak Ridge is a massive company, Maya. Your father is playing a very dangerous corporate game. If Marcus Vance gives them the multi-million-dollar contract based on these photos, Oak Ridge will have to build it. They will just hire a cheap factory in China or Mexico to copy the pictures," I said, remembering what Aunt Clara told me. Ben shook his head slowly. "No. That's where your father made a huge mistake. He knows real estate, but he doesn't know woodworking. A cheap factory uses CNC machines and metal brackets to mass-produce furniture. Marcus Vance is famous for his quality inspections. If Vance's team looks at a mass-produced table, they will instantly see the machine marks and the cheap glue. It won't match your photos. Your father promised them handcrafted, solid Wyoming walnut." A small spark of hope lit up in my chest. "So, they can't actually make it without me?" "Exactly," Ben said, a sharp smile appearing on his face. "Your father thinks you are just a silly girl playing in a garage. He thinks he can steal your pictures, win the contract, and figure out the building part later. But in the commercial construction world, if you fail to deliver the exact prototype you promised, you get hit with a breach of contract lawsuit. Vance could destroy Oak Ridge." I felt a cold chill go down my back. For years my dad made me feel stupid. But right now, sitting in this dusty office, I realized he was the one who didn't understand how the real world worked. "What do we do?" I asked. Ben turned to his computer and opened a new web page. It was the Wyoming Secretary of State website. "First, you are no longer a hobbyist," Ben said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "We are filing your articles of organization right now. What is the name of your company?" I thought for a second. I wanted a name that was strong, something that couldn't be broken. "Ironwood Custom Fabrication," I said. "Good," Ben nodded. The state filing fee is $100. Then I will get your EIN, your employer identification number, from the IRS website. That's free. By 5 p.m. today, you will be a legal, registered business owner in the state of Wyoming. I handed him my debit card. When he swiped it, I felt a strange, heavy emotion in my throat. It wasn't sadness, it was freedom. Next, Ben said, pulling out a thick stack of blank paper. We are going to establish your paper trail. Do you have the original sketches for the walnut pieces? Yes. I have the paper drawings and the digital CAD files on my laptop. The digital files have timestamps from 4 months ago. Perfect. We are going to officially register those designs under Ironwood Custom Fabrication. We will attach the timestamps, Ben explained. Your digital CAD files have original metadata timestamps from 4 months ago. Your father's PDFs are dated last week. In a court of law, metadata is bulletproof. The LLC just gives us the corporate shield to sue him for commercial damages. Right now your father thinks you are hiding in your garage, crying because he gave your warehouse to your sister. He has no idea you are sitting here building a legal wall around your work. I looked down at my rough, scarred hands. I suddenly remembered a day when I was 14 years old. I had spent 3 weeks carving a beautiful little wooden birdhouse. I left it on the edge of the driveway to dry in the sun. Dad came home from work, looked right at it, and drove his heavy SUV straight over it. He crushed it into tiny pieces. Keep your junk out of the driveway, Maya, he had said, stepping out of the car without even looking at my crying face. For 14 years I thought it was an accident. Now I knew the truth. He always crushed my work because he couldn't control it. Maya? Ben's voice pulled me back to the present. He pushed a printed piece of paper across the desk and handed me a black pen. Sign at the bottom. I looked at the paper. Ironwood Custom Fabrication, LLC. Sole member Maya Evans. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake at all. I signed my name in clear, dark ink. Congratulations, Miss Evans, Ben said gently. He looked at me not like a messy kid but like an equal, like a real person. You are officially a CEO, I smiled, a real, genuine smile. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for my family to give me permission to exist. I had Ben, I had my skills, I had the law on my side. Thank you, Ben, I said, putting the signed paper carefully into my yellow folder. Don't thank me yet, Ben warned, leaning forward. Oak Ridge is going to have their big pitch meeting with Marcus Vance soon. When they fail to build the prototype, they are going to panic. Your father will come looking for you. He will try to force you to build it for him to save his job. I know, I said quietly, standing up and putting on my coat. And when he does, I'll be ready. It was Monday, December 15th. A heavy snowstorm had hit Laramie overnight, covering my small garage shop in a thick blanket of white. Inside, the air smelled like sharp pine wood and strong black coffee. I was standing at my workbench at 8 a.m., wearing my heavy winter coat, measuring a piece of maple wood. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Ben Carter, my lawyer. I'm outside. Open the garage door. I brought someone you need to meet. I pushed the heavy metal door up. The freezing wind rushed in. Ben was standing there, wrapped in a thick wool scarf. Standing next to him was a young man in a cheap black winter jacket. He looked about 25. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his hands were shoved deep into his pockets. He looked exhausted, like a guy who hadn't slept in days. Maya, close the door before we freeze, Ben said, stepping inside and shaking the snow off his boots. I pulled the door down and turned on my small electric heater. Ben, what's going on? Who is this? This is Leo Martinez, Ben said, pointing to the young man. He's my neighbor's son. Until 2 weeks ago, Leo was a junior project estimator at Oak Ridge Development Group. He worked directly under your father. I stopped wiping my hands on my towel. I looked at Leo closely. My dad fired you. Leo gave a short, bitter laugh. He rubbed his cold, red hands together over the small heater. Yeah, he fired me the day before the company handed out yearly bonuses. He told HR my math was wrong on a concrete order. It wasn't true. He just needed to cut his department's budget so his own profit margins looked better for his promotion. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, not for me, but for Leo. I knew exactly how my dad's brain worked. People weren't humans to him. They were just numbers on a piece of paper. You were either useful, or you were thrown away. Why did you bring him here, Ben? I asked quietly. Because you are a brilliant woodworker, Maya, Ben said, leaning against my workbench. But you don't know how to read corporate blueprints. You don't know how to write a commercial supply bid. Leo does. He knows Oak Ridge's entire pricing system. He needs a job, and Ironwood Custom Fabrication needs a project manager. You two need each other. I looked at my bank app on my phone. I still had the $14,000 I had saved for the warehouse. I can pay you $25 an hour, I told Leo, looking him straight in the eyes. It's not corporate money. We are working in a freezing garage, but I promise you, I will never steal from you, and I will never lie to you. Leo looked around the dusty, cold shop. Then he looked at the half-finished maple table on my workbench. He saw the perfectly clean hand-cut wood joints. He slowly nodded. Deal, Leo said. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a silver laptop. And since I'm officially your employee now, I have something to show you, something you really need to see. Leo put the laptop on my workbench, right next to the sawdust. He opened it and clicked on a folder named Aspen Ridge Resort, Manish Final Bid. When your dad fired me, they gave me 10 minutes to pack my desk, Leo explained, his fingers typing quickly. I backed up my personal hard drive. I took all the project files I worked on. I wanted proof that my math was correct. But while I was looking through the files last night, I found the final pitch presentation your dad sent to Marcus Vance. He turned the laptop screen toward me. My breath caught in my throat. On the screen was a beautiful, glossy 50-page PDF document. The title read, Oak Ridge Development, Luxury Interior Proposal. I scrolled down. On page 12, there were my photos, the black walnut crib, the oak dining table, the close-ups of my wood joints. But that wasn't what made my blood turn to ice. Under my photos, there was a scanned legal document. It was a letter of intent. It stated that Oak Ridge Development had a legally binding contract with Maya Evans, an independent contractor. The letter promised that I would produce 40 custom dining tables and 200 custom chairs for the Aspen Ridge Resort at a highly discounted rate, exclusively for Oak Ridge. At the bottom of the page there was a signature, Maya Evans. I stared at the screen. My hands started to shake. He forged my signature, I whispered. The words felt like sandpaper in my throat. He faked a contract. Yes, Leo said quietly. Your dad told Marcus Vance that you are basically an in-house employee. If Oak Ridge wins the resort contract, Marcus Vance will demand these exact tables. Your dad plans to force you to build them for pennies. And if you refuse? If I refuse, I said, my voice getting harder. He shows this fake contract to the lawyers. He blames me. He ruins my name in the industry before I even start, and he plays the victim. Ben crossed his arms. His face was dark. It's corporate fraud, Maya. It's a serious crime. We can take this to the police right now. I looked at the fake signature on the screen. For a second, the old Maya, the scared daughter who just wanted peace, wanted to call the police and hide in her room. But then I thought about Chloe's baby shower. I thought about Dad laughing at me in front of his rich friends. I thought about the Elm Street warehouse he stole from me just to keep me broke and trapped. I didn't want him to just get a quiet fine from the police. I wanted him to face the exact people he lied to. I wanted his perfect shiny mask to be ripped off in front of the whole world. No police. Not yet, I said. I looked at Leo. When is the final pitch meeting? When does Marcus Vance officially inspect the prototype models before signing the multi-million-dollar check? Leo clicked another file. Friday, January 20th. At the Oak Ridge main headquarters in Cheyenne. Marcus Vance is flying in personally with his team of inspectors. I looked at the calendar on my garage wall. We had exactly 5 weeks. Leo, I said, turning to my new project manager. Can you get us into that building on January 20th? Leo smiled. It was a small, sharp smile. I still have my employee access badge. They forgot to ask for it when they fired me. Good, I said. I closed the laptop. My heart wasn't beating fast anymore. It was completely calm, steady, like a perfectly built machine. We have 5 weeks to build the real ironwood, and on January 20th we are going to a meeting. It was Wednesday, January 4th. The new year had started with freezing winds and heavy snow, but inside my garage, things were heating up. We had 16 days left until the big Oak Ridge pitch meeting. My garage didn't look like a messy hobby shop anymore. Leo had completely organized it. He set up a temporary office desk using a piece of flat plywood over 2 metal sawhorses. He had 3 thick binders open, his laptop plugged in, and a calculator clicking non-stop. I was covered in a fine layer of brown dust. I was using 80 grit sandpaper on the armrest of a chair. It wasn't just any chair. It was the exact prototype for the Aspen Ridge Resort. I was building the physical proof of my work. The air smelled strongly of cut Wyoming black walnut and hot coffee. Okay, look at this, Leo said, rubbing his tired eyes. He pointed to his laptop screen. I just ran the final math on your dad's fake proposal. He quoted Marcus Vance a price of $4 per board foot for the wood. That is completely impossible. I stopped sanding and wiped my forehead with the back of my wrist. $4? Good quality black walnut costs $14 a board foot. $4 only buys cheap, soft pine wood. Exactly, Leo nodded, his voice sharp. Your dad lied on the corporate bid. He promised Vance luxury walnut, but he priced it for cheap pine. He planned to win the contract, steal your designs, and then force a factory in China to make them out of cheap wood with fake brown stain. He thought Marcus Vance wouldn't notice the difference. Marcus Vance builds $100 million hotels, I said quietly. He will definitely notice. But by the time Vance notices, the hotel will already be built, and your dad will already have his vice president promotion, Leo explained. It's a massive corporate scam, but I just finished our bid. Leo handed me a thick, beautifully printed folder. On the front it said, Ironwood Custom Fabrication, Honest Craftsmanship. Inside, Leo had listed the real prices. He included my real labor costs, the actual price of solid walnut, and a realistic timeline. It was much more expensive than my dad's fake bid, but it was the truth. It was a real, legal corporate document, backed by Ben Carter's law firm. We are ready, Leo smiled, taking a sip of his black coffee. Suddenly, a bright white SUV pulled up into my snowy driveway. The headlights shined through the garage window. Leo frowned and closed his laptop. Are we expecting a client? I looked at the shiny car. No. The door opened, and Chloe stepped out. She was wearing a long, expensive white winter coat and clean leather boots. She carefully walked around a pile of snow and stepped into my dusty garage. She instantly covered her nose with her gloved hand. Maya, it smells like dirt in here, Chloe complained, looking around at the tools and the sawdust on the floor. She didn't even look at Leo. To her, he was just a shadow in the corner. Hello, Chloe, I said. My voice was calm. I didn't feel angry. I just felt tired of the show. What are you doing here? Chloe dropped her hand and gave me a big, sweet smile, the kind of smile she used when she wanted Dad to buy her something. Well, the new boutique on Elm Street is opening next month, she said happily. But Mark and I are having a tiny problem. The contractor wants $3,000 just to build 10 wooden display shelves. Can you believe that? For some simple wood. I picked up a clean rag and slowly wiped my hands. Wood is expensive, Chloe, and labor takes time. I know. Chloe waved her hand like it didn't matter. But I told Dad, why pay a stranger when Maya does this for fun? So, I need you to build the 10 shelves. I bought some nice white paint. I need them by next Friday. I'll even buy you dinner as a thank you. I stared at her. 2 months ago, she sat in my dad's office, drinking tea, while they stole the exact building I had saved my money for. Now, she was standing in my freezing garage, asking me to build her store fixtures for free. She didn't feel guilty. She honestly believed I was put on this earth just to be useful to her. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at her perfectly clean white coat. I can't do it for free, Chloe, I said. My voice was completely flat, like a robot. My commercial shop rate is $85 an hour. The materials will cost about $600. I require a 50% deposit up front, and I can't start until February because I am fully booked with other clients. Chloe's smile completely dropped. Her eyes widened in shock. Excuse me? She asked, her voice going high and tight. Maya, I am your sister. You are asking me to pay you? It's just a few pieces of wood. You don't even have a real job. Ironwood Custom Fabrication is a registered LLC, I replied, pointing to the framed legal paper Ben had given me, hanging on the wall. I run a business. If you want my services, you sign a contract and pay the invoice. If you don't want to pay, you can hire the other contractor. Chloe's face turned red. She looked at me like I was a stranger. She was so used to me shrinking away and apologizing. She didn't know how to handle me saying no. Dad was right, Chloe said bitterly, her voice shaking with fake hurt. You really are selfish. I try to include you in my life. I try to give you something to do, and you just care about money. You are tearing this family apart over some stupid shelves. She turned around, her expensive boots stomping against the concrete floor. She got back into her white SUV, slammed the door, and sped out of the driveway, kicking up dirty snow behind her. I watched her car disappear down the street. The garage was quiet again. Tearing the family apart, huh? Leo said softly from his desk. He opened his laptop again. My old boss used to say the exact same thing when I asked to be paid for working on weekends. It's a script, I said, picking up my sandpaper again. The heavy weight that used to sit on my chest whenever my family was upset with me was completely gone. I felt light. When you stop letting them use you, they call you selfish. It's the only word they know. I turned back to the walnut chair. I rubbed the smooth wood. Chloe wanted me to feel guilty, but I didn't have time for guilt. I had 12 days left to finish the perfect prototype. I had 12 days to prepare for the biggest meeting of my life. And on January 20th, Dad was going to learn what happens when the daughter he kept in the dirt finally stands up. It was Monday, January 16th. We only had 4 days left until the pitch meeting at Oak Ridge. My garage was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the electric heater. It was 11:30 p.m. The air smelled deeply of warm boiled linseed oil and old coffee. I was kneeling on the concrete floor, rubbing the oil into the wood of the final Aspen Ridge prototype chair. As the oil touched the solid black walnut, the dull wood suddenly turned into a rich, dark chocolate color. The beautiful natural patterns of the wood grain popped out, looking like slow-moving water frozen in time. It was perfect. No screws, no cheap glue, just heavy, honest Wyoming wood, held together by exact math and careful hands. The strong smell of the oil made my mind drift backward. I suddenly remembered my 19th birthday. I had spent 3 weeks making a beautiful, smooth oak serving tray for my dad. I carved his initials into the side. When I proudly placed it on the dinner table, he didn't even pick it up. He just put his wet, icy glass of whiskey right in the middle of it, leaving a permanent white water ring on the fresh wood. "Next time, Maya, just buy me a tie," he had said, cutting his steak. Aunt Clara had sitting next to him, sipping her wine, and she just nodded. "Don't fill the house with your practice projects, dear." I remembered swallowing hard, picking up my ruined tray, and eating my dinner in the kitchen alone. I remembered thinking I would never be good enough for them. "Maya?" I blinked and looked up. The memory faded. Leo was standing next to me. He was holding a cardboard box of cheap pepperoni pizza. His dark eyes looked tired, but he was smiling. "You need to eat," Leo said, holding out a paper plate with a warm slice. "You've been sanding and oiling for 9 hours straight. The chair looks incredible. Marcus Vance is going to lose his mind when he sees it." I took the pizza. "Thanks, Leo." Just then the small side door of the garage opened. Ben Carter, my lawyer, walked in. He was wearing his heavy winter coat and holding a thick brown leather briefcase. "Good evening, team," Ben said. He walked over to Leo's makeshift plywood desk and opened his briefcase. He pulled out a stack of papers with red stamps on them. "The trap is officially set." I stood up and wiped my oily hands on a rag. "What do you mean?" Ben pointed to a map of the Oak Ridge headquarters that Leo had pinned to the wall. "Leo told me about the security protocol for Friday," Ben explained. "When Marcus Vance visits, Oak Ridge locks down the entire executive floor. There are security guards at the elevators. Even with Leo's old employee badge, you can't just walk into the main boardroom. They will stop you." My stomach dropped. I hadn't thought about that. "So how do we get in?" "With this," Ben said. He picked up the top paper and handed it to me. At the top, printed in big, bold letters, it said, "Cease and desist order, minors, copyright infringement and corporate fraud." "I spent the weekend drafting this," Ben said, his voice completely serious. "It is a legal notice from Ironwood Custom Fabrication to Oak Ridge Development. It officially accuses your father, Richard Evans, of stealing your registered designs and forging your signature on a commercial contract." I looked at the heavy black words on the paper. It looked so real, so scary. "But how does this get us past the security guards?" "Because of state law," Ben smiled. "By law, a legal demand like this must be handed directly to the person it is meant for. It's called being served. Security guards cannot legally stop a registered attorney from serving court papers during normal business hours. If they try, they are breaking the law." Leo laughed out loud and grabbed a slice of pizza. "That is genius. We aren't crashing a meeting. We are delivering legal mail." "Exactly," Ben nodded. He looked at me carefully. "I will walk in first. I will flash my attorney badge. You and Leo will be right behind me carrying the prototype chair. By the time your father realizes what is happening, we will already be standing in the middle of the boardroom, right in front of Marcus Vance." I looked at the piece of paper in my hand. Then I looked at Ben and Leo. Ben was a tired lawyer who worked out of a dusty office. Leo was a young guy who got fired just so my dad could make more money. We were just 3 normal people eating cheap pizza in a freezing garage. But looking at them, I felt a strange, warm feeling in my chest. A feeling I had never felt at Aunt Clara's Thanksgiving dinner or Chloe's expensive baby shower. I felt safe. I felt respected. For 28 years I thought family meant the people who shared your blood. But blood didn't mean loyalty. Blood was just biology. Real family was the people who sat in the cold with you, who helped you carry the heavy weight, and who fought for you when you were too tired to fight for yourself. "Are you ready for this, Maya?" Ben asked gently. "Once we walk through those boardroom doors, there is no going back. Your relationship with your father will be over forever." I looked over at the dark walnut chair shining under the garage lights. I thought about the Elm Street warehouse. I thought about the fake contract with my forged signature. "My relationship with him was over a long time ago, Ben," I said quietly. I folded the legal paper and put it in my pocket. "I am ready. Let's go take his mask off." It was Friday, January 20th, 9:45 a.m. The Wyoming sky was a pale, icy blue, and the wind was freezing. I stood on the sidewalk outside the Oak Ridge Development headquarters in downtown Cheyenne. The building was a massive tower of dark glass and steel. It looked like a giant mirror reflecting the cold city around it. Usually a building like this would make me feel tiny and useless. But today, standing on the frozen concrete, my heart beat with a slow, steady rhythm. I was wearing my clean, dark blue work jeans, my heavy brown boots, and a plain black sweater. I didn't try to dress like them. I didn't wear a suit. I came exactly as I was, a woodworker. Next to me, Leo grabbed one side of the heavy Aspen Ridge prototype chair. I grabbed the other side. The chair was carefully covered with a thick blue moving blanket so nobody could see it. Ben Carter stood in front of us, wearing his long gray coat and holding his brown leather briefcase. "Everyone ready?" Ben asked, looking back at us. "Ready," Leo said. He looked a little nervous, but he held the chair tightly. I just nodded. Instead of walking through the heavy spinning glass front doors into the massive lobby, Leo led us around the side of the building to the back loading dock. "HR fired me, but they forgot to deactivate my access badge in the system," Leo whispered. He swiped his plastic ID card against the scanner by the heavy metal freight doors. The light blinked green. We bypassed the private security guards entirely and carried the heavy chair directly into the freight elevator. The doors closed, blocking out the street noise. The elevator was completely silent as the numbers slowly ticked upward. 5, 6, 7. I looked at the metal doors. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt like a machine, completing a job. Ding. The doors slid open on the 10th floor. The carpet here was incredibly thick, absorbing the sound of our boots. The walls were covered in expensive dark wood panels. At the very end of the long hallway were two massive oak doors. They were slightly open, and a warm golden light spilled out into the hall. We walked quietly toward the doors. As we got closer, I heard my dad's voice echoing from inside the room. I signaled for Ben and Leo to stop just outside. I wanted to hear him. I needed to hear exactly how he sold his lies. "Mr. Vance," my dad was saying, his voice smooth, warm, and dripping with confidence. "At Oak Ridge, we don't just build luxury resorts. We build stories. We build legacies. Look at the screen behind me." I peeked through the small crack in the oak doors. The boardroom was huge. A long, polished table filled the center. Sitting at the head of the table was Marcus Vance. He was an older man with sharp silver hair, wearing a simple but clearly expensive dark suit. He wasn't smiling. He was staring intensely at a giant projection screen on the wall. On the screen was a massive, high-resolution picture of the black walnut crib I had built for Chloe's baby shower. "This level of craftsmanship is completely dead in the modern corporate world," Dad continued, walking slowly around the table like a proud teacher. "But not at Oak Ridge. We control an exclusive private fabrication firm right here in Wyoming. I personally oversee the builder. She is an independent contractor, but we have her fully locked into an ironclad contract. We keep her focused. We provide the materials, and she provides the art. If you sign this deal with Oak Ridge today, every single room in the Aspen Ridge Resort will have this exact, hand-cut, solid walnut furniture, guaranteed." He was incredible. He made it sound like he was a wise, caring manager guiding a wild artist. He made it sound like keeping me trapped in a freezing garage was just his way of controlling quality. He actually believed he was the hero of this story. He believed he was doing the right thing for his company and his family. Marcus Vance leaned forward, resting his chin on his hands. "It looks beautiful in the pictures, Richard, but pictures can lie. Wood has a soul. You can't feel the weight of it on a screen. Do you have a physical prototype for us to inspect today?" Dad smiled warmly. He didn't look nervous at all. "Mr. Vance, the prototype is currently being finished at our secure facility. We will have it shipped to your Chicago office next week. But I assure you, the contract guarantees—" "No," Vance interrupted. His voice was quiet, but it completely cut through Dad's charm. I don't sign $100 million checks based on promises and PDFs. I wanted to see the wood today. Dad's smile tightened just a tiny bit. I understand, sir, but the builder is very particular. She works on her own schedule. As her manager, I have to give her the space she needs to create. It's the price we pay for genius. He was blaming me. Even when he was stealing my work, he was blaming me for not being there. I looked at Ben. I gave him a single nod. Ben pushed the heavy oak doors wide open. The loud creak of the wood made everyone in the room jump. Dad stopped talking. Marcus Vance looked up. The 5 other executives at the table spun around in their leather chairs. Ben walked right into the middle of the expensive room. Leo and I followed, carrying the heavy chair covered in the blue blanket. We set it down gently on the thick carpet, right next to the massive boardroom table. "Excuse the interruption, gentlemen," Ben said loudly, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "My name is Benjamin Carter. I am the legal counsel for Ironwood Custom Fabrication." Dad's face went completely pale. The warm, charming color drained out of his cheeks in less than a second. His eyes locked onto me, wide with pure shock. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I stepped forward, standing right under the bright boardroom lights. I didn't look at my dad. I looked straight at the billionaire at the end of the table. "Mr. Vance," I said calmly, my voice steady and clear. "My name is Maya Evans. I am the sole owner and CEO of Ironwood Custom Fabrication. I am the builder who made the furniture on that screen. And I heard you wanted to see a physical prototype." I reached out, grabbed the corner of the thick blue blanket, and pulled it off. The dark, polished black walnut chair sat beautifully under the boardroom lights. The natural oil finish gleamed. The hand-cut joints were tight and flawless. It looked heavy, expensive, and incredibly real. The room went dead silent. Marcus Vance slowly stood up from his chair, his eyes glued to the wood. The public confrontation had begun, and I brought all the proof. The boardroom was so quiet you could hear the soft humming of the lights on the ceiling. Marcus Vance didn't look at my dad. He didn't look at the other executives in their expensive suits. He slowly walked around the long table and stopped right in front of my chair. He didn't just look at it. He got down on one knee. He ran his hand under the seat, feeling the wood where nobody usually looks. He pressed his thumb against the tight corners where the back legs met the seat. "Blind mortise and tenon joints," Vance whispered, his voice full of respect. "No metal brackets. No cheap glue gaps. It feels solid like a rock." He stood up and finally looked at me. His sharp gray eyes studied my dusty boots and my plain black sweater. "You built this with your own hands?" "Yes, Mr. Vance," I said. 400 hours of training for every single hour I spent on that chair. Solid Wyoming black walnut, finished with raw linseed oil. Vance nodded slowly. He turned to my dad. "Richard," Vance said, his voice flat, "you told me the prototype was delayed. You told me the builder was struggling with the schedule." Dad's face was completely white, but he forced a thick, tight smile. He quickly stepped toward me, trying to block Vance from seeing me. He tried to put his hand on my shoulder, but I took a step back. His hand grabbed empty air. "Mr. Vance, I apologize for this," Dad said, letting out a fake, nervous laugh. "This is Maya. She is my daughter. She has a terrible habit of being dramatic. She just wanted to surprise us." "Maya, sweetheart, this is a closed business meeting. Let's go down to my office and talk." He looked at me. His eyes were wide and filled with a silent, sharp threat. It was the same look he gave me when I was a little girl and I dropped a glass in the kitchen. "Stay quiet, or I will punish you." But I wasn't a little girl anymore. I didn't feel small. "I am not going to your office, Richard," I said. My voice wasn't angry or loud. It was just cold. "I am here for a business meeting, because this is my work you are trying to sell." Dad's fake smile twitched. "Maya, stop it. You don't understand what you are doing. You are confused." Ben Carter stepped forward. He unlatched his brown leather briefcase. The click echoed in the quiet room. He pulled out the thick envelope with the red stamps and pressed it directly into my dad's chest. Dad instinctively grabbed it. "Richard Evans, you are officially served," Ben said clearly. "That is a cease and desist order. You are ordered to stop using the registered property of Ironwood Custom Fabrication." Dad stared at the envelope in his hands like it was a snake. The other Oak Ridge executives at the table started whispering to each other. Ben then pulled out another folder, the clean, thick folder Leo had printed, and handed it to Marcus Vance. "Mr. Vance, my name is Benjamin Carter. I represent Ironwood Custom Fabrication. Inside that folder is the actual legal corporate bid for the Aspen Ridge Resort project, signed by Maya Evans, the sole CEO." Vance opened the folder. His eyes quickly scanned the pages, Then he looked at his own Oak Ridge files. "Richard," Vance said, his voice dropping an octave. "Your Oak Ridge proposal includes a letter of intent. It says you have an exclusive signed contract with Maya Evans." "He forged my signature," I said smoothly. I looked right into Vance's eyes. "I never signed a contract with Oak Ridge Development. I don't work for him. I work in my own shop. He stole my portfolio pictures to win your money." Dad's face turned red. The polite mask completely broke. He threw the legal envelope onto the table. "She is my daughter," Dad shouted, pointing a finger at me. "I fed her for 18 years. I paid for her clothes. We had a verbal family agreement. She is just throwing a tantrum today because I gave a warehouse lease to her sister. She doesn't know anything about the real business world. She just plays in a garage." Dad turned back to Vance, breathing heavily, trying to sound reasonable again. "Mr. Vance, listen to me. I am managing her. I know what is best for her. Without Oak Ridge to guide her, she will fail. We are keeping the project in the family." "You aren't managing anything, Richard," a new voice said. Leo stepped out from behind me. He looked directly at the man who had fired him 2 weeks ago. Dad's eyes widened. "Leo, what are you doing here? You don't work here anymore." "No, I work for Ironwood now," Leo said, his voice completely steady. He looked at Marcus Vance. "Mr. Vance, I was the junior project estimator for this bid. Richard Evans fired me because I refused to hide his math." Leo walked to the table and pointed at Vance's Oak Ridge folder. "Look at page 22 of Richard's bid," Leo said. "He quoted you $4 per board foot for solid black walnut. That is impossible. Real walnut costs $14. Richard planned to win your contract, lock Maya out, and hire a mass production factory in China. He was going to use cheap pine wood, spray it with brown chemical stain, and tell you it was luxury walnut. He was going to pocket millions of dollars in the budget difference to secure his vice president promotion." The room went completely dead. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Marcus Vance slowly turned his head and looked at my dad. Vance's face was completely empty of any emotion, which was terrifying. "Is this true, Richard?" Vance asked quietly. "Did you lie to me about the wood?" Dad started to sweat. He pulled at the collar of his expensive shirt. "Mr. Vance, sir. In commercial real estate, we have to find margins. The guests at the hotel wouldn't know the difference between stained pine and walnut. I was saving Oak Ridge money. I was doing my job." He actually believed it. He believed that lying, forging my name, and scamming a billionaire was just smart business. He truly thought he was the smartest man in the room. Vance slowly closed the Oak Ridge folder on the table. "I know the difference, Richard," Vance said softly. "I pay for truth. I pay for quality. Forging a vendor signature on a multi-million-dollar corporate bid is federal wire fraud. If I hand this folder to the SEC or the state prosecutor, you won't just lose your job, you'll face prison. I am burying this bid, and Oak Ridge will quietly terminate you by noon to avoid federal exposure." Vance picked up his phone from the table. "Security. I need 3 guards in the 10th floor boardroom. Immediately." Dad took a step back, hitting the edge of the large table. He looked at the other executives. They all looked away from him. He was completely alone. He looked at me, his eyes full of panic and anger. "Maya," Dad whispered, his voice shaking. "Maya, please, tell them it's a misunderstanding. Tell them we are a family. You are going to ruin my life." I looked at him. I saw the silver watch on his wrist. I remembered him laughing at my crib at the baby shower. I remembered him crushing my wooden birdhouse in the driveway. I didn't smile. I didn't yell. I just told him the truth. "Building cabinets is a hobby, Dad," I said quietly, repeating his exact words. "But I'm not a hobbyist anymore. I'm a CEO." The heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open. 3 large security guards in dark suits walked in. Their radios buzzed quietly in the silent room. Marcus Vance didn't raise his voice. He just pointed a single finger at my dad. "Escort Mr. Evans to his office," Vance told the guards. "Watch him pack his personal items, then walk him out of the front doors. If he tries to take any Oak Ridge corporate files, call the police." Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He looked at the 5 other Oak Ridge executives sitting around the table. He had worked with them for 10 years. He played golf with them. But right now they all looked down at their notebooks or stared at the wall. Nobody was going to save him. In the corporate world, loyalty only lasts until the money is in danger. "Marcus, please," Dad begged. His voice was high and weak. The charming, powerful senior director was completely gone. "I gave 12 years to this company, and you almost cost me my reputation in 10 minutes, Vance replied coldly. "Get out." 2 guards stepped forward and grabbed Dad by the arms. For a second, Dad stopped fighting them. He turned his head and looked right at me. His eyes were red. There was no apology in his look. There was only deep, bitter anger. "You did this," Dad whispered to me, his voice shaking. "You destroyed your own father." I looked back at him. My heartbeat was slow and calm. "No," I said simply. "You built a house on a weak foundation. It fell down on its own." The guards pulled him away. The heavy oak doors clicked shut. The boardroom was quiet again. The fake perfection of my family was officially broken. The secret was out in the open. Marcus Vance let out a long breath. He rubbed his tired eyes, then pointed to the empty leather chairs at the table. "Sit down, Miss Evans, Mr. Martinez," Vance said. Ben, Leo, and I pulled out chairs and sat down. Vance opened the ironwood custom fabrication folder that Leo had made. He put on his reading glasses and spent 5 long minutes reading our numbers in complete silence. The only sound was the ticking of the silver clock on the wall. "Your math is honest, Mr. Martinez," Vance finally said, looking at Leo. "You locked in the supplier rates for the wood, so if lumber prices jump in the spring, my budget stays safe." "Yes, sir," Leo nodded professionally. "Ironwood takes the risk, not you. That is how real businesses operate." Vance turned his sharp gray eyes to me. "Miss Evans, the chair you brought is a masterpiece, but 40 large dining tables and 200 chairs is a massive order. You operate out of a residential garage. You don't have the space or the manpower. I don't give charity to small businesses just because they have a good story. Can you actually deliver this?" This was the real world. There were no magical endings where a billionaire just hands you a bag of money. You had to prove you could do the work. "Look at page 4 of the bid, Mr. Vance," I said confidently. Vance turned the page. "Our bid includes the exact cost to sign a commercial lease for a 5,000 square foot warehouse on Elm Street," I explained. "It also includes the salaries to hire 4 experienced assistant carpenters. I will cut the joints and do the final oil finish on every single piece myself to guarantee quality. My assistants will do the heavy sanding and prep work. We don't take shortcuts." Vance tapped his expensive pen on the table. He looked at my rough, scarred hands, then at the beautiful walnut chair sitting on the carpet. "I will not sign a contract for the full order today," Vance said. "It is too risky." My stomach dropped a little, but I kept my face perfectly still. "However," Vance continued, pulling out a fresh piece of paper, "I will sign a Phase 1 contract, 10 tables and 50 chairs. I will give you a 30% deposit today to secure your warehouse and hire your team. If you deliver those perfectly in 90 days, you automatically get the contract for the rest of the hotel. Do we have a deal?" He held out his hand across the table. I looked at Ben. My lawyer gave me a proud smile and nodded. I looked at Leo. My project manager was grinning from ear to ear. I reached out and shook the billionaire's hand. His grip was strong, but mine was stronger. "We have a deal, Mr. Vance," I said. It was exactly 1 week later, Friday evening, January 27th. The Wyoming wind was howling outside, but I didn't care. I was standing in the middle of the massive empty warehouse on Elm Street. The floors were clean concrete. The huge glass windows let in the cold moonlight. The Ironwood Custom Fabrication bank account had a deposit of $85,000 from the Aspen Ridge Resort. Leo was in the corner, setting up a real metal desk for his computer. We had hired 2 assistants who were starting on Monday. Suddenly my cell phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. The screen showed a picture of Aunt Clara. I stared at the screen for a moment. In the past I would have answered immediately, terrified that she was mad at me. Now I just felt tired. I swiped the green button and put the phone to my ear. "Hello, Clara," I said quietly. "Maya, finally." Clara's voice was sharp, loud, and full of tears. "I have been calling you for 3 days. Do you have any idea what you have done?" "I secured a corporate contract," I said, walking slowly across the empty warehouse floor. "You ruined us," Clara screamed. Her voice echoed out of the phone speaker. "Your father was fired. Oak Ridge is investigating him for corporate fraud. They froze his entire pension. And Chloe, Mark's investors pulled out of her boutique because they read the news about your father. She is sitting in an empty shop crying her eyes out. How can you sleep at night?" I stopped walking. I looked at the dark street outside the window. "I sleep very well, Clara," I said. "He is your father, Maya. He is your blood. You owe him," Clara cried, trying to use the same old guilt to break me down. She wanted me to apologize. She wanted me to feel like the bad guy so they could go back to feeling like the good guys. "Blood doesn't give you the right to steal from me," I said. My voice was as hard and cold as the concrete under my boots. Dad lied to his boss. Dad forged my signature. Dad chose to steal my work instead of supporting me. He made those choices, Clara. Now he has to pay the bill for them. You are selfish. You are a cold, ungrateful. I didn't let her finish. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I didn't yell back. I didn't try to explain myself anymore. You cannot explain the truth to people who want to stay blind. I pressed the red button. The call ended. Then, I opened my phone settings, clicked on Aunt Clara's name, and pressed block caller. I did the same thing for Chloe, and then I blocked Dad. I put my phone back into my pocket. The warehouse was completely quiet again. It was a beautiful, peaceful silence. I walked over to the stack of fresh black walnut wood waiting in the center of the room. It was time to get to work. 2 months passed. It was Saturday, March 14th. The thick snow outside the Elm Street warehouse was finally starting to melt into dirty puddles under the pale morning sun. Inside, the shop was alive. The loud, steady hum of our new commercial dust collector filled the large room, mixed with the sharp scream of the table saw. The 2 young assistant carpenters we had hired were carefully moving a large maple slab, while Leo sat at his clean metal desk, talking to a lumber supplier on the phone. I stood at my own workbench, wiping a layer of fine sawdust off a finished walnut tabletop. My hands were still rough and calloused, but the angry red scratches were completely gone. I felt tired, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind you feel when you build something that stands perfectly straight and true. The mailman walked through the front door, leaving a small stack of letters on the edge of the desk. Leo picked them up, sorted through the bills, and suddenly stopped. He looked over at me, his smile fading. He walked across the concrete floor and held out a thick white envelope. "This came for you," Leo said quietly. "It's not a business letter." I took the envelope. In the top left corner, the return address was written in neat, familiar blue ink. Richard Evans, Cheyenne, Wyoming. My fingers froze for a second. I sat down on a wooden stool and slid my thumb under the paper seal. Inside was a single piece of lined paper. "Maya, I am writing this because my phone calls won't go through. Things are very difficult here right now. The company decided not to file police charges, but I had to resign from Oak Ridge. The mortgage on the house is past due, and Chloe had to close her boutique completely. She stays in her room all day. I know I was hard on you. I know I said things at the baby shower that hurt you. But I was only trying to push you to be stronger. A father has to make tough choices for the future of his family. We all made mistakes, but blood is blood, Maya. We are still your family. Please call your sister. Please call me. Let's sit down and fix this before the family is completely broken." I read the words twice. I looked at the handwriting I used to fear so much. A year ago, a letter like this would have made my stomach twist into knots. It would have made me feel guilty, wondering if I really was the bad daughter who ruined everyone's life. But looking at the paper now, I didn't feel any pain. The fog was gone. I just saw the words clearly for what they were. He still wasn't apologizing for stealing my work or forging my name. He was calling a crime a mistake. He was using the word family like a tool to get what he wanted. I folded the paper neatly, walked over to the black plastic trash can near the main door, and dropped it inside. I looked around the bright, warm warehouse. I looked at Leo, who was watching me with worried, supportive eyes, and the 2 young carpenters laughing as they adjusted a heavy wood clamp. This was the structure I chose to build. These were the people who stood by me. I walked back to my workbench, picked up my sanding block, and went back to work. It was Friday, April 17th, 4:30 p.m. The spring rain was hitting the metal roof of the warehouse, making a loud, steady drumming sound. Outside the open loading dock, a massive white delivery truck was parked with its engine running. The air smelled like wet asphalt and heavy diesel smoke. "Okay, tilt it back," I told David, one of our young carpenters. We were holding the final black walnut dining table. It weighed almost 200 pounds. "Don't let the legs scrape the metal ramp." "Got it, Maya," David grunted, his boots slipping a little on the wet metal before he caught his balance. We carefully pushed the table into the back of the truck and locked the heavy straps around it. Leo stood by the truck door, holding a plastic clipboard. He checked off the last box with a red pen. 10 tables, 50 chairs, Leo said. He let out a long breath and wiped the rain off his forehead. Phase 1 is officially done. The truck driver, a tall guy wearing a yellow rain jacket, handed me a digital tablet. "Sign here for the pickup, ma'am," he said. I signed my name with my finger. By Monday morning, Marcus Vance would have his furniture in Chicago, and by Tuesday, Ironwood Custom Fabrication would receive the final check for $198,000. Phase 2 of the hotel was officially ours. The driver pulled down the heavy metal door of the truck with a loud bang. We stood in the loading dock and watched the truck drive away, its red taillights glowing in the gray rain. I leaned against the brick wall of the warehouse, My arms ached, and my back was incredibly stiff. But standing there, listening to the rain, I felt a deep, quiet peace settle into my bones. For 28 years, I thought I needed my dad's applause to feel like a real person. I thought if I just built the perfect piece of furniture, my sister would finally look at me with respect. I spent my whole life trying to fix a broken situation, not realizing that some things are just rotten from the inside. You can't put a shiny finish on bad wood, it will always break. My dad was sitting in a quiet house, angry at the world. Chloe was blaming everyone else for her empty boutique. They were still trapped in their own lies, unable to see the damage they caused. But I was free. "Hey Maya," Leo called out, turning off the bright overhead shop lights. Only the small desk lamp was left on. "David and Sam want to get food to celebrate. We were thinking about that cheap pizza place down the street." I looked at Leo, then I looked at David and Sam, who were waiting near the door, covered in sawdust and laughing about a joke. They showed up early every morning. They worked hard. They never lied to me. "No," I said, pushing myself off the brick wall. I grabbed my old brown coat from the hook. "Cancel the pizza. We just finished a major corporate contract. We are going to the steakhouse on 4th Street. My treat." Leo smiled. "Are you sure? Steaks are like $30 each." "I'm sure," I laughed. I walked out the front door into the cool rain. I pulled the heavy metal gate closed and locked it with a loud, solid click. I didn't look back at the dark street holding my past. I put my keys in my pocket and walked toward my truck to join the people who finally felt like home.